So let's talk about the band systems themselves. And the truth is there's some history here that a lot of people don't realize about trading bands. Trading bands are not new. They're not a new system at all. In fact, moving average percent bands, they've been around for a long time. Since at least the 1950s, people have been using the percent bands or a variation of something along those lines. Then by the 1960s, a guy by the name of Chester Keltner came along and he perfected a band system that we know as the Keltner bands. In fact, some people still use the Keltner bands today as they do provide some really good signals. Then along came a guy by the name of Richard Donchian. Donchian created what we call the Donchian channel. This is a very famous system of trading. In fact, some of you may be familiar with the turtle traders. A lot of the turtle trading strategies came from around this Donchian channel. It's a very good system that really encapsulates a lot of the same kind of principles as the Bollinger Bands. Well, here's the concept of band trading. Regardless of what system you're looking at, the concept here is that the bands would encompass most of the price action of the stock. So whatever the trade is you're looking at, the idea is that these bands would encompass that trade and kind of contain the price action. Again, it's a way of creating a framework around the stock that you're looking at here. And then what happens is when it pushes beyond the envelope, it's going to create some sort of an extreme. It's going to reflect that there's an extreme in the marketplace happening at that time. This is great because it starts to establish some trends and it helps to give some framework and some boundaries to that stock. And of course, it's also going to help with some overbought, oversold indications. This is kind of the key that all band systems and their intention are intended to create there. Now, they don't all do it successfully, but that's the idea here. Take a look here at a couple of charts. This is the moving average percent band envelope. And notice if you look through here, it looks a lot like a Bollinger Band if you're familiar with the Bollinger Bands. The big difference here, notice we're not making it up to the upper bands here. We're tracking right along that middle moving average. And then, of course, when it drops down, well, hey, that works great. It's right on the band, and then it bounces back up. This one worked perfect here. Not quite so much here. We pushed outside of the band. Again, we pushed outside of the band. And if you look at this, you see, wow, some of it looks good. Over here on the right side, this whole chunk, really looks pretty good as far as a band system. The left side, not so much. The trends, not so much. There were some weaknesses in this system. This is actually the system that John Bollinger built his off of. He started working with these percent band envelopes, and Bollinger Bands evolved from this. Take a look at the Keltner Bands. Again, the Keltner Bands was intended as a way to improve upon the percent bands. You've got some really great signals over here on the left side of the chart. Most of this works really, really great. In fact, it almost looks like a Bollinger Band. It works so great. Then you get outside the band here, and this is one of the signals in the Keltners. Once you're outside of the band, you're kind of establishing a solid trend. Then again, you look through these sideways areas here, and you've got some pretty good containment. This one over here on the far right, not quite as good, but in general, the Keltner Bands did provide some interesting signals. They're different signals than what we get on the Bollinger Bands, but it was a good system, and there's some good signals here. Take a look at the Donchian channels here, and you notice this actually contains everything, and it was a great system that Richard Donchian built here. The way that it works is it takes the highest high, and it basically builds a resistance line right there, and so you see 100% is contained inside the Donchian channels here. And if that's your outcome to contain it, then this is probably actually the best system of all to contain all of the price action itself. But this is a different way of looking at kind of some similar information. It draws those highs, it draws those lows, and then you've got a real definitive limit to the highs and the lows there. Now, all of these systems worked. There was ways to trade them. All of these were a foundation for trading systems, and they did work in their own right. My opinion, and probably the opinion of most people, is the Donchian of these three that we just looked at, the Donchian channels are probably the best. In fact, there's been some really profitable trading systems that are built around the Donchian channels. What John Bollinger was working with was the first example that I showed you, the envelopes, the moving average envelopes, and he got frustrated with that, kind of the same frustration that everybody's had, which is, you have to keep changing the settings all the time. You saw it on that chart. For part of the chart, it worked great. For part of the chart, it didn't work very well, and that was the weakness of the percent bands. It was great in theory, but it just didn't always give the right signals. And so what John Bollinger was trying to do is find a way, how can I set the bands correctly? And what he discovered is the fixed percentage that we were building off of the moving average there, it was really a flawed formula because it did not allow for the most important component of the stock, which is, in fact, the volatility. And that's what he discovered. Volatility was the problem. So uncovering the fact that volatility is the key, that's what was messing up the percent bands. And so what he discovered is we needed a way to allow those bands to expand regardless of what that volatility was looking like. In other words, we needed a relative system rather than an absolute system. That's where the Bollinger Bands really shine. What makes the Bollinger Bands so powerful is they create that relative system that does contain the majority of the price action, but it does it in a way that's got some flexibility. And again, that's why the Bollinger Bands in particular, really excel. Take a look over here at the percent bands again. Look, it was too loose over here on the left. It worked okay over here on the right, if you take a look at that. But there was too many weaknesses. And so the solution was a band system based on a standard deviation. And let me just underline that word for you here, standard deviation. That is the key that allowed for the Bollinger Bands to provide that flexibility and that volatility component here, standard deviation. It allowed for the volatility, and in the end, it creates a band system that encompasses about 90% of the price. Now, in theory, if you look at the statistics, in theory, it should encompass about 95%. But in practice, it really only encompasses right around 90% of the price action. The good news is it does it consistently, and you don't have to keep changing the settings. It does it across the board with pretty much all issues. Take a look here at the band system. Same stock here, but with the Bollinger Bands instead of the percent bands. And look here, we're trading right to the upper bands, right to the lower bands. We push right outside the bands, and the bands are expanding just perfectly. It works across the chart pretty much equally the same. That's the great benefit here of the Bollinger Bands.